Wait, isn't that your poor ex-wife? I thought she was barren. How did she have triplets? Greater than you know, sometimes life has a funny way of coming full circle. Sometimes the person who breaks you becomes the very reason you discover just how strong you really are. My name is Rosalyn and this is the story of how I went from being the woman who gave everything to a man who gave me nothing to becoming the woman who walked into his wedding with triplets on my hip and dignity in my heart. Before I proceed, I want you to do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and drop your country in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening to me from. Thank you. But let me start from the beginning because every ending needs its proper beginning. I was 23 when I married Jerome. 23 and so full of hope it practically radiated from my skin. I believed in the fairy tale, you know. I believed that love conquered all. That a good woman could love a man into being better. That marriage was this sacred thing where two people built something beautiful together. Jerome was handsome in that way that makes your girlfriends jealous and your mama nervous. 6'2", smooth, dark skin, smile that could charm the paint off walls and away with words that made you feel like you were the only woman in the world. When he proposed to me outside that little church in Atlanta where we first met, I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. The first red flag should have been his son, Fred. Not Fred himself. That baby was innocent in all of this. But the way Jerome talked about Fred's mother, Veronica, she was just a mistake, he'd say whenever I brought up the fact that they still talked regularly. You're my wife now, baby. You're my future. I swallowed those words like medicine. Bitter, but necessary. I told myself that loving Jerome meant accepting all of him, including his past. I told myself that being a good wife meant supporting my husband, even when that support felt like swallowing glass. The second red flag was how he treated me when we couldn't get pregnant right away. Month after month, I take those tests, hoping and praying for two little lines. Month after month, nothing. And Jerome made sure I knew whose fault he thought it was. My boy's strong, he'd say, gesturing toward Fred's pictures on our mantle. I already got proof I can make babies, so what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Those 4 words became the soundtrack to my marriage. What's wrong with you when dinner wasn't exactly how he liked it? What's wrong with you when I asked him to spend less time texting Veronica? What's wrong with you when I suggested we both go to the doctor to figure out why we weren't conceiving? I ain't going to no doctor. He'd snap. I got a healthy son running around. That's all the proof I need that everything works down there. So, I went alone. Month after month, appointment after appointment, test after test. I let them poke me and prod me and examine every inch of my reproductive system. I drank those awful contrast drinks for the imaging. I lay on those cold tables while machines hummed around me. I subjected myself to procedures that left me cramping and bleeding and crying in hospital parking lots by myself. And you know what? All those tests showed that I was perfectly completely 100% fertile and healthy. My eggs were good. My tubes were clear. My hormone levels were textbook perfect. There was absolutely nothing wrong with me. But Jerome didn't want to hear that. When I came home with the results, practically vibrating with relief and hope, he barely looked up from his phone. That's good, baby, he mumbled, fingers flying across the screen, probably texting Veronica again. Jerome, this means the issue might be. Ain't no issue with me, he cut me off, finally looking up with eyes that had gone cold. I got proof walking around calling me daddy. Don't start with that nonsense. The physical pain was bad enough. Jerome had hands that were quick to grab, quick to squeeze just a little too hard when he was frustrated. He never hit me. He was too smart for that, too concerned about his image. But he found other ways to hurt me. A grip on my wrist that left marks. Fingers digging into my shoulders when he wanted to make a point. The kind of touches that looked like affection from the outside, but felt like warnings to me. The emotional pain was worse. Jerome was an artist when it came to tearing me down. He knew exactly which words would cut the deepest, exactly how to make me feel small and worthless and grateful for whatever scraps of attention he threw my way. You lucky I married you, he'd say during our fights. Most men wouldn't want a woman who can't give them children. Maybe if you spent less time running your mouth and more time figuring out what's wrong with you, we might actually have a family by now. Veronica never had any problems getting pregnant. Maybe the problem ain't men. Maybe the problem is you. 6 years. 6 years of this. 6 years of taking his anger and his blame and his cruelty and convincing myself that this was what marriage looked like. 6 years of watching him text his ex-girlfriend. Of pretending not to notice when he'd slip out for hours at a time with no explanation. Of lying awake at night wondering what I was doing wrong. 6 years of giving him everything, my love, my loyalty, my self-respect, and eventually my money. The money part started when Jerome's job at the auto shop started slowing down. Business was bad, he said. They were cutting hours. We were behind on rents. Behind on the car payment, behind on everything. I watched him get more and more frustrated, more and more angry, and that anger always found its way back to me. I had been saving money, not much. My job at the department store didn't pay much, but I was careful. I clipped coupons and bought generic brands and skipped lunch more often than I ate it. Over the years, I had managed to save up $12,000. It was going to be our nest egg. I thought money for a house someday or maybe for fertility treatments if we decided to go that route. Jerome found out about that money on a Tuesday. I don't even remember how it came up. But suddenly he was staring at me with this look I'd never seen before. Not anger, not frustration, but something that looked almost like hunger. 12,000, he repeated. You've been sitting on 12,000 while I'm over here stressing about bills. I was saving it for us, I said quickly, recognizing the danger in his voice. For our future, for when our future is right now, he interrupted. I got an opportunity, Rosalyn. A real opportunity. My boy Damon, he's opening up a second location for his dry cleaning business. He needs a partner, someone to run the new spot. This could be it, baby. This could be our way out. I should have said no. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to say no. But Jerome was looking at me with something that almost looked like love. Talking to me like he was my partner instead of my problem. And I was so desperate for that feeling that I ignored every red flag. How much does he need? I heard myself asking. All of it, Jerome said quickly. The whole 12,000. I know it's a lot, baby, but think about it. This is our chance. Once the business takes off, we'll make that money back in no time. And maybe he moved closer to me, his hands gentle in my face for once. Maybe once I'm not so stressed about money, we can really focus on starting our family. The hope in those words was like a drug. I was so desperate to believe that our problems were just about money, that once we got our finances straight, everything else would fall into place. I was so desperate to believe that Jerome could love me the way I loved him. That night, I gave him everything. I emptied my savings account and handed him every penny I had worked so hard to save. And Jerome, he held me close and whispered promises in my ear about how everything was going to change, how this was going to be the start of our real life together. I recorded him that night on my phone. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me knew I needed to protect myself. Or maybe I just wanted to capture this moment when Jerome seemed to love me again. Whatever the reason, I'm grateful for that recording. Now, the dry cleaning business did take off. Within 6 months, Jerome was making more money than he'd ever made in his life. The business was pulling in thousands of dollars every month, and Jerome was walking around with his chest puffed out like he had built an empire. But funny thing about success, it didn't make Jerome treat me any better. If anything, it made him worse. Now he had money and confidence, and he started acting like he was too good for the woman who had made it all possible. He started staying out later, started dressing better, smelling like cologne I didn't buy him. Started talking to me like I was an employee instead of my wife. The text messages with Veronica became phone calls. The phone calls became visits to check on his son. The visits became overnights because Fred had a school play or a soccer game or just because Jerome felt like being there. And me, I was still working at the department store, still struggling to pay for groceries while Jerome spent hundreds of dollars on new clothes and expensive dinners that I wasn't invited to. Still sleeping alone in our bed while he claimed he was working later handling business. The end came on a Thursday. I remember because I had been planning to make Jerome's favorite dinner, fried chicken and mac and cheese. And I wanted to surprise him with the news that I had finally saved up enough money to take that vacation we'd been talking about. It wasn't much, just a weekend in Savannah, but I thought it might be good for us to get away together. I came home early from work, arms full of groceries, keys jingling as I tried to unlock the front door. That's when I heard voices coming from inside our house. Jerome's voice and another voice that I recognized immediately. Veronica. I stood frozen on my own front porch listening to my husband laugh with his ex-girlfriend in our living room. Listening to them talk about their plans like I didn't exist. She's so pathetic. Veronica was saying, her voice carrying that particular kind of cruelty that only comes from women who think they're winning. Still playing house like y'all actually have a real marriage. Man, I can't keep doing this much longer, Jerome replied. And my heart stopped beating. I'm making good money now. I don't need her anymore. So what are you waiting for? Just divorce her. It ain't that simple. She might try to come for the business. And technically, she did help me get started. How much could she have possibly helped? Jerome laughed and the sound cut through me like a blade. He gave me $12,000 to get the business started. Cleaned out her whole savings account. And you just took it. Veronica sounded impressed. Took it and ran with it. That woman's so desperate for me to love her. She'd probably give me her kidneys if I asked nice enough. They both laughed at that. Laughed at my desperation, my love, my sacrifice. Laughed at the woman who had given everything for a man who saw her as nothing more than a bank account with legs. I backed away from the door slowly, my whole body shaking. I sat in my car for 2 hours, crying until I had no tears left, trying to figure out what to do with this information. When I finally went back inside, Jerome was alone, sitting on the couch like nothing had happened. Hey, baby, he said casually, not even looking up from the TV. What's for dinner? I wanted to confront him. I wanted to scream and throw things and demand answers. But I was so broken down, so tired that I just went into the kitchen and started cooking. I made his fried chicken and his mac and cheese, and I watched him eat it while my heart broke into smaller and smaller pieces. 3 days later, he asked for a divorce. He didn't even have the decency to sit me down and talk to me like an adult. He just came home from work one day and tossed some papers on the kitchen table while I was washing dishes. Sign these, he said simply. What are they? I asked, even though I already knew. Divorce papers. I want out, Rosalyn. This isn't working. I turned around slowly, dish towel still in my hands. What isn't working? He shrugged like we were talking about the weather. All of it. We don't have kids. We barely talk anymore. And honestly, I just don't love you like that anymore. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. 6 years of marriage and this was how it ended, with papers on a table and a shrug. Jerome, we can work on this, I said desperately. We can go to counseling. We can. Nah, he interrupted, already walking toward the door. I'm done working on it. Just sign the papers, Rosalyn. Make this easy for both of us. What about the business? The money I gave you? He paused at the door, and for a second, I thought I saw something that looked like guilt cross his face, but it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. That was a gift, he said finally. You can't take back a gift. There was no prenup. Jerome had been so confident in our love that he insisted we didn't need one. We're going to be together forever, baby, he had said. But forever, apparently had an expiration date. Within a month, Veronica and Fran were moving into our house. Within 2 months, the divorce was final. Within 3 months, I was loading everything I owned into the back of my Honda Civic and driving away from the life I had built with a man who never deserved it. I had nothing. No money, no house, no husband, no children. At 29 years old, I was starting over from absolute zero. And the only place I had to go was back home to Chicago to live with my mama. Mama was sick when I got there. She had been sick for a while, but she hadn't wanted to worry me. Diabetes and high blood pressure. Her doctor said she needed to change her diet, reduce stress, take better care of herself. But how could she do that when she was working 2 jobs just to pay for her medications? She had owned a small restaurant once years ago. Nothing fancy, just a little place that served good home cooking for working folks in the neighborhood. But when she got sick, she couldn't keep up with the demands of running a restaurant. The place had been closed for 2 years when I moved back home, and it looked like it. I'm sorry you have to see me like this, baby, Mama said on our first night back, looking at me with eyes full of sadness and love. I wanted to have more to offer you when you came home. Mama, you don't have anything to apologize for, I told her, holding her hands in mine. I'm the one who should be sorry. I should have been here helping you instead of chasing after a man who didn't want me. Don't you dare blame yourself for loving someone, she said firmly. That's not a weakness, Rosalyn. That's a strength. The fact that you can love so fully, so completely, even when it hurts, that's a gift. Don't let him take that away from you. But it felt like he had taken everything away from me. I was broken, hollowed out, a shell of the woman I used to be. I couldn't sleep, barely ate, spent most of my days staring at the ceiling and wondering how I had gotten everything so wrong. It was during one of those dark days that I first noticed him. Roberts. He was tall and lean with kind eyes and a camera hanging around his neck. He had been hired to document the revitalization efforts in our neighborhood. And he kept coming around asking if he could film the old restaurant. I know it's closed, but there's something beautiful about the bones of this place. I can see the love that went into it. Mama liked him immediately. She invited him in for coffee and spent hours telling him stories about the restaurant's heyday, about the people who used to come in for Sunday dinner, about the community that had formed around her little place. I mostly hid in my room during those early visits. I wasn't ready to be around people, wasn't ready to pretend to be okay when everything inside me felt broken. But Roberts was persistent in the gentlest way possible. I don't have to talk to me, he said one day, finding me sitting on the back porch where I thought I could avoid him, but can I sit here with you? Sometimes it's nice just to have company. And so he sat, not talking, not pushing, just being there. It was the first time in months that I felt like I could breathe properly. It took me 3 months to tell him what had happened. 3 months of him showing up consistently, bringing groceries for Mama, helping with small repairs around the house, treating us both with a kindness I had forgotten existed in the world. When I finally told him about Jerome, about the marriage and the money, and the way it all ended, I expected pity. I expected him to look at me like I was damaged goods, like most people do when they hear stories like mine. Instead, Roberts got angry. Not at me, but for me. That man is a fool, and someday he's going to realize what he gave up. I gave him everything, I whispered, the words cutting my throat on their way out. My money, my love, my life, everything. And it wasn't enough. It wasn't about you not being enough, Robert said gently. It was about him not being man enough to recognize what he had. Slowly, carefully, I started to rebuild. Not just my life, but myself. I started going to therapy, working through the trauma of my marriage and the depression that had settled over me like a thick blanket. I started helping Mama with her medical appointments, making sure she was eating right, and taking her medications. And I started looking at that old restaurant with new eyes. The building was solid, just tired. The kitchen equipment was old, but functional. The dining room needed work, but the bones were good, just like Roberts had said. And I started to have an idea. What if we didn't reopen it as a traditional restaurant? What if we turned it into something different, something that fit the neighborhood's changing needs? I started researching. I spent hours at the library learning about food trucks and grab-and-go concepts, about healthy eating and meal prep services. I studied successful small businesses, read everything I could get my hands on about entrepreneurship and marketing and customer service. The idea that started to form was simple. Healthy, affordable meals for busy people. Fresh salads and grain bowls, smoothies and cold-pressed juices, meal prep containers that working families could grab on their way home. Food that nourished people's bodies instead of just filling them up. But ideas don't pay bills, and I didn't have any money to turn my vision into reality. So, I started small. I got a job at a nearby grocery store, working early morning shifts, stocking shelves, and running registers. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest work, and every paycheck brought me a little closer to my goal. In the evenings, I experimented. I turned Mama's kitchen into a test lab, trying different recipes and combinations, learning about nutrition and flavor profiles and food safety. Mama became my taste tester and my biggest supporter. "This is it, baby," she said one night after trying a quinoa bowl one had made with roasted vegetables and tahini dressing. "This is going to change everything." I wanted to believe her, but I was scared. Scared of failing. Scared of losing what little I had managed to save. Scared of putting myself out there only to be knocked down again. That's when Roberts made his offer. "Let me help you," he said one evening as I was cleaning up after another night of recipe testing. "I've been documenting the neighborhood's changes anyway. Let me document your journey, too." "Roberts, I don't have money to pay you," he interrupted. "I'm not asking for money. I'm